Although rude, these reminders of the unclarity of what did what to whom, the gap between luck and liability, the flow of wealth from whites to blacks will fall on deaf ears. Reparations are déjà vu all over again. And none of these points, apt though they were, had the appropriate impact on quotas. Why? Because they seem mere quibbles in the face of the stark, overwhelming race difference in wealth. Blacks here or in Africa are so thoroughly behind whites anywhere that there must be a reason. And what can that be but white theft? So many people find this inference obvious, or say they do, that the fact of white guilt goes without saying. And once white guilt is assumed, the only open question is how whites should expunge it. Quotas, money, both. The issue of black poverty must be faced squarely, for no subtleties about fault will save whites from themselves once they see themselves as in the wrong, given their superego, I guess. Hence the need to shock by bringing up the race differences that were also forbidden in the quota debate. It must be insisted that blacks are known to be on average less intelligent than whites, and that this is almost certainly why they are on average poorer. As Professor Lin has recently documented, what nobody doubts, national wealth tracks national IQ, as individual wealth tracks individual IQ. There is no mystery here. Things people want sometimes occur naturally, but most wealth is created by transforming nature. The ability to transform nature requires insight into its works, and a higher IQ affords greater insight. Whites' higher IQ allows them to make a greater quantity and greater variety of more desirable things. That's why whites are richer. As all AR readers know, the evidence is overwhelming that racial IQ differences are genetic in origin. Even non-readers of AR are beginning to sense this uneasily. The key point is to bring this to bear on reparations. That's why, much as I admire David Horowitz for his courageous, articulate advertisements, they still don't quite get to the core of the matter. And if you don't get to the core of the matter, it's not going to be effective. Reparationists will continue to wave the bloody shirt of poverty, presenting whites with a stark intellectual choice. Agree that poverty is caused by white sin and pay up, or find a better explanation. Biology is the better explanation that must be deployed. That whites will do anything to deny home truths about race is not news. But I believe that a desire to avoid these same truths plays an important but ill-understood role in the minds of reparationists. And I think it would be a mistake to dismiss them glibly as racial racketeers who are just in it for the buck. So I don't have any channel to Jesse Jackson's mind, but I'm going to suggest a hypothesis about what may be going on in some people's minds. People tend to treat symptoms as causes, often to the point of seeking to create the symptoms of a desirable condition to convince themselves that the condition itself exists. For instance, were an endogenous chemical that confers immunity to cancer also found to cause freckles, guess what most people would do? They would start examining their skin very carefully for freckles. A great many would stand in the sun for a long time in the hope that freckles would appear. They might paint freckles on themselves and kind of talk themselves into the paint can spilled accidentally. I must be prone to freckles, therefore proving that I must be immune to cancer. Finding freckles might come to seem very urgent, just as people planning a picnic find it urgent that the arrows on the TV weather map point the right way, right? And we do think that way. I suspect that reparationists and other racial partisans invert the order of injury and desert in just this way. In the real world, injury is the basis, the cause of liability. It goes like this. A is okay, B injures A, B owes A. Clear enough. So to speak, the debt is a symptom of the injury. It doesn't cause the injury. But now imagine our long-suffering Jones. Restaurant's been burned down. He's in an ambiguous situation. He is not doing well. He doesn't know why, but he fears the cause may be an intrinsic defect. In this state of mind, he may well succumb to inversion and search for someone who owes him reparations as evidence that he was injured. He says to himself, I'm owed, so someone must have hurt me. So my sorry state must be someone else's fault. So I must be okay. I suspect this mechanism may be what sustains the odd intensification of black demands in the face of constant white concession. To avoid the conclusion that there is something wrong with them, blacks keep convincing themselves that their failures are someone else's fault. And to keep themselves convinced that their failures are someone else's fault, they convince themselves that somebody owes them for what it did to them. Again, if somebody owes me, it can't be me. This is why concessions are never enough. What could blacks tell themselves were their every grievance satisfied, their every claim met, and still they do not do as well as whites? The shameful conclusion would be unavoidable. To keep this fearful possibility at bay, new grievances are invented, new unmet claims, whose existence proves that their plight is not due to anything in themselves. So I think, as I draw to an end, that opposition to reparations must rest on a proper understanding not only of kind of their logical role in the case for reparations, but also on their expressive and symbolic value to those that demand them. If you don't see them this way, sort of the two sides are going to keep talking past each other. Well, thank you. Thanks, question.
Well, I'd like to turn to tactics here. The gravamen of your earlier thrust was, I think, that we deal with this on the basis of IQ differences or as an explanatory factor. But it seems to me in the political culture we're operating that's extremely sensitive and could backfire, or at least people might refuse to listen. And I want to ask you about two other approaches. Both were suggested by Thomas Sowell. One is germane to the earlier discussion of reparations for whites. In fact, in a recent article in Human Events, Sowell says at the end, perhaps it's the whites who are owed reparations. It seems to me you can begin a debate more easily by focusing on that, the damage to whites and the help that whites.
You don't think that would be incendiary?
Not as, it wouldn't harm the self-esteem as much directly as IQ. But the other point I wanted to make is also derived from Sowell's earlier work. That is, we live in unfortunately, a culture dominated by what's called multiculturalism, right, and diversity. Why not focus on black culture and emphasize that as the source of the disparities and take advantage of that context, turn it back on its head?
Well, once again, that will be, about 40% as inflammatory as talking about IQ differences, and then will become as 100% inflammatory when you start raising the question, why do these cultural differences exist? And then you kind of push that back and you're back to IQ differences. I don't think it would be, there's two things to remember. First of all, the truth is true. That's the thing about the truth. Since this is the cause of the differences that are deplored, you just have to say that or your case is going to fall apart like a house of cards. And in general, to say, no, we don't owe you reparations, you owe us reparations, perpetuates the sore head mindset that gets this whole thing going. That it would be much, much better to say, look, what happened, happened. I will do you the favor of not really getting into the question of why this really is the case, but I will generously avert my eyes and call us even as of right this minute. Thank you.